Li Ka-Shing is one of the richest people in the world. But how exactly did he get to where he is today? The Hong Kong-based billionaire started as a 15-year-old boy who was forced to leave his education behind in 1940 after his family fled their home in southern China. In March 2018, the 31st richest man in the world announced that he'd be stepping down after spending over 70 years building his empire from the literal ground up. Today we're going to be telling you about the rags to riches story of Li Ka-Shing, one of the world's most successful and philanthropic billionaires. How long would it take to become a billionaire? If the math were to be believed, an average minimum wage worker in the United States would take approximately 69,000 years to become a billionaire. Now, many of the world's richest men and women have had generational wealth. Kylie Jenner was a part of the infamous socialite clan, the Kardashians. Jeff Bezos was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and Mark Zuckerberg had substantially wealthy parents, which means that the playing field was never really leveled out to begin with. However, don't let this deter you. Rags to riches stories are rare, but they're real. One of the best examples out there is that of Li Ka-Shing, the richest man in Hong Kong and the 31st richest person in the entire world, with an estimated net worth of $33.4 billion. At 91 years old, it's fair to say that Ka-Shing didn't take an estimated 69,000 years to become a billionaire. However, the once impoverished Chinese youth had to drop out of school at 15 to support his family. He started way below the average minimum wage worker in the United States. However, today, he's one of the richest people in the world. What's his story? How did he get here? Was it luck, or was it hard work? We'll find out. Humble beginnings. Between 1937 and 1945, the Republic of China was embroiled in a bloody civil war against the Empire of Japan. Between 10 to 25 million Chinese civilians were either murdered or dispersed, owing to the Japanese military's advancement towards southern China. Amongst the many families that had to flee their homes, one was that of Li Ka-Shing. Ka-Shing was only 14 years old during the events of the Second Sino-Japanese War and had to relocate along with his family to Hong Kong. His father, Li Ka-Shing, had previously worked as a primary school principal in Guangdong Province in southern China. Shortly after the family relocated back in 1940, Ka-Shing developed consumption tuberculosis and passed away in 1943. Ka-Shing, the oldest male child of the family, was forced to drop out of school at the age of 15 and look for work. He found work as a salesman in a plastics factory at the age of 16 and would send approximately 90% of his income back home to his mother. Li Ka-Shing would reportedly work for approximately 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, a practice he kept up with even at the age of 89. After about 2 years, Ka-Shing was promoted to factory manager, owing to his impressive stats as a salesman. He was about 18 at the time and would continue to work for the company for another 4 years until he left in 1950 to start his own company at the age of 22. The birth of Cheung Kong Industries. The correlation between knowledge and business as the key to success is closer than ever. This was Ka-Shing's motto back when he founded his own plastics manufacturing company in 1950. At the time, the 22-year-old had a total of $50,000 saved up from personal savings and funds borrowed from relatives. Ka-Shing had dropped out of school at the age of 15 and wasn't particularly well versed in the engineering that went on behind manufacturing plastics. But he claimed to have learned through trial and error at his previous employer's company to come up with the schematics of his own. One thing that particularly interested Ka-Shing was mixing colors with plastics. He managed to master the art by 1950 and thereafter dedicated his own company to manufacturing and selling plastic flowers. Now, plastics had always been a big thing, but the industry was particularly booming back in the late 20th century. Ka-Shing made good use of the times and called on several investors to visit his company. One particular investor was so impressed with the work that he placed a huge order for plastic flowers through Ka-Shing's company. The order and the subsequent markup value for plastic flowers were so significant that the young business owner was able to return the loans he took to start Cheung Kong Industries, plus make enough capital to keep his company going and invest in real estate. Plastics was how Ka-Shing started his rags to riches story, but real estate was how he sustained his billions. Venturing into real estate. After developing a sizable income from Cheung Kong Industries, Ka-Shing shifted his focus toward real estate. It's probably important to remember that Hong Kong was in a state of political turmoil back in the 1950s, with riots erupting every other day, Chinese migrants pouring in, and many influential people from the region escaping. Consequently, residential and commercial properties were never cheaper. Ka-Shing decided to make the most of the situation and began investing in real estate. During board meetings, the business magnate would reportedly claim that his investments were bound to become fruitful in the future, since Hong Kong would one day become the leading port in all of Asia. He was right. Ka-Shing would also emphasize the fact that he wanted his company, Cheung Kong Holdings, to surpass Hong Kong Land as the leading developer in the region. Sure enough, by the 1960s and 1970s, Hong Kong had regained its momentum, and the land that Cheung Kong Holdings had acquired for cheap skyrocketed. The business mogul started to build residential and commercial properties in the region as more and more people and businesses started relocating to Hong Kong. Consequently, Cheung Kong Holdings decided to sell The Center, the fifth largest skyscraper in Hong Kong, for a total of $5.15 billion, making it the single largest real estate deal in the Asia-Pacific region, earning the title Superman. You know what they say, you have to spend money to make money. In 1979, Li's firm acquired a stake in 19th-century British trading house Hutchison Whampoa. This would be Cheung Kong's first big buy, and a move that showed the world that Hong Kong was a budding region for entrepreneurs. Li soon controlled much of the property dealing, port traffic, electric utilities, and telecommunications networks in Hong Kong. He then expanded his reach to Canada, where his company took a controlling interest in the Canadian oil drilling company Husky Energy. Cheung Kong Industries would later acquire a major share in the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. By the 1980s, Ka-Shing had made more money than he could have ever possibly imagined. Therefore, he decided to add another company under his domain, the Li Ka-Shing Foundation, a philanthropic effort wherein the business mogul redirected a substantial portion of his income towards funding university tuition, housing, and healthcare for the impoverished people of China and Hong Kong. In 2006, Ka-Shing referred to his foundation as his third son and pledged to donate a third of his wealth, which comes up to roughly $22 billion, towards the foundation. In June 2019, the Li Ka-Shing Foundation announced that it will cover the tuition of Shantou University's incoming class for up to 5 years as a part of an ongoing initiative to make higher education more accessible in China. For his philanthropic endeavors and his resilience, Ka-Shing earned the nickname Superman. Ka-Shing's business practices that made him the man he is today. One might suspect that much of Ka-Shing's wealth came from nothing more than sheer luck. He had worked at an uncle's plastic watch strap manufacturing business, rose the ranks, learned more about plastics at a time when it was booming, and then capitalized on Hong Kong's unstable situation. They wouldn't be completely wrong. However, a huge chunk of Ka-Shing's net worth came from the business practices that made him into the man that he is today. Ka-Shing would famously wear a modest black suit to all of his business meetings and would put on a $50 Citizen's watch to accessorize. He would later switch to an equally cheap Seiko watch in the 1990s before settling on a $400 Citizen watch owing to its battery power and durability. While the man spends most of his money on real estate, technology, and business opportunities for Cheung Kong Industries, assets, and holdings, he barely spends any of the money on himself. His family has lived in the same neighborhood for decades, which coincidentally is now one of the most affluent neighborhoods in all of Hong Kong. He did, however, spend as much money as he could on his son's education. Victor Li and Richard Li are Canadian citizens who received their bachelor in Canada. Ka-Shing has repeatedly emphasized the importance of education. Back in 1957, the young man taught himself accounting by reading up on various books, and for a long time was solely responsible for all of Cheung Kong Industries' accounting books. That's all for today's video. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more content just like this. We'll see you again in another video. Until then,